Welcome to my podcast, Scientist Free from Religion. This podcast has as proposal, as main idea to talk about a scientific topic but also talk about religion. Different from the common assumption in which science and religion should be separated, here on this podcast we recognize formally that science and religion are not disconnected. Sadly, religion can be a very big threat to science. So on this podcast, the proposal is to talk about it freely, so without fear, without the illusion that they are separate topics. So we are going to cover a possible topic. Most of them will be focused on the connection between religion and science, especially to defend science. That's our goal. Our goal here is to defend science from religion and to help to make science, to spread scientific thinking, especially to defend it against religion.
10 Common Christian Arguments to Defend Christianity. Over time, I have had many discussions with Christians, both in personal conversations and by observing debates. One thing that stands out is how quickly their arguments become repetitive. The well-structured arguments used by apologists are rarely brought up, and even when they are, most Christians seem unaware of their formal names or underlying logic. Recently, I had a conversation with someone I met while playing chess, and I was hopeful that I might hear something new. However, the same patterns emerged once again, and the discussion ended as they often do, with the classic, "I have my opinion and you have yours." There is this case of this famous atheist that became Christian. I have seen her interview. She went all the way down to be a Christian. She even found ways to support Trump, saying that the media is portraying him badly strategically. She is clearly under influence of the Christian propaganda. I have studied the conversion of Ayaan Hirsi Ali to Christianity. She is totally lost and her argumentation is terrible. She left Islamism, then she became a hardcore atheist, now she became a Christian. She even supports Trump. Her argumentation: the media is lying about Trump. This is a typical Christian argumentation. In fact, it seems the apologetic worked on her. She is totally misinformed and she fell for the Christians' lies and disinformation. For me, she is more afraid than else. Christianity feeds on fear. Christianity did not last so long by change. They need fear and panic to survive. Her argumentation in favor of Christianity, especially her defense of Trump and claims about media bias, reflects a pattern often seen in Christian apologetic. Many Christian converts, particularly those with a history of strong ideological positions, tend to adopt not just the faith but also its associated political and cultural stances. Her shift mirrors the way Christianity often absorbs people through fear, whether it be fear of Islam, fear of moral decay, or fear of a world without absolute meaning. Christianity has always thrived on fear. Fear of hell, fear of chaos, fear of moral collapse. Apologetic often prey on this by presenting Christianity as the only solid ground in a world of uncertainty. Hirsi Ali's conversion could be a result of this psychological pressure rather than a genuine theological realization. What is Christian? Nowadays it is not quite that. We have to be a little more vague in our meaning of Christianity. I think, however, that there are two different items which are quite essential to anybody calling himself a Christian. The first is one of a dogmatic nature, namely, that you must believe in God and immortality. If you do not believe in those two things, I do not think that you can properly call yourself a Christian. Then further than that, as the name implies, you must have some kind of belief about Christ. The Mohammedans, for instance, also believe in God and in immortality, and yet they would not call themselves Christians. I think you must have at the very lowest the belief that Christ was, if not divine, at least the best and wisest of men. If you are not going to believe that much about Christ, I do not think you have any right to call yourself a Christian. Why I am not a Christian, Bertrand Russell. Here are 10 common arguments Christians use to defend their faith, often without much depth or reflection. 1. Jesus was a wise and peaceful man. Many Christians defend their faith by portraying Jesus as an undeniably wise and peaceful figure. Here I will align with Russell. It is hard to call Jesus wise when he threatened people with hell. There is the story of the fig tree. It is hard to believe that a wise man would lose his temper over a fig tree. Then there is the curious story of the fig tree, which always rather puzzled me. You remember what happened about the fig tree? He was hungry. And seeing a fig tree afar off having leaves, he came if haply he might find anything thereon, and when he came to it he found nothing but leaves, for the time of figs was not yet. And Jesus answered and said unto it, No man eat fruit of thee hereafter forever. And Peter saith unto him, Master, behold, the fig tree which thou cursed is withered away. This is a very curious story because it was not the right time of year for figs, and you really could not blame the tree. I cannot myself feel that either in the matter of wisdom or in the matter of virtue, Christ stands quite as high as some other people known to history. I think I should put Buddha and Socrates above him in those respects. Why I am not a Christian, Bertrand Russell. While this is largely true in some aspects, it does not prove his divinity or the truth of Christianity. Many religious and philosophical figures throughout history have preached peace and wisdom without claiming to be the Son of God. The argument that Jesus was wise and peaceful is often used as if it were proof of his divinity or the validity of Christianity, but that logic is flawed. Even if we grant that Jesus said some wise things, that alone does not make him divine. Many historical figures, Buddha, Socrates, Confucius, taught profound moral and philosophical lessons without claiming to be gods. Bertrand Russell's critique is especially relevant because it highlights contradictions in Jesus' behavior. The fig tree incident is a perfect example. Losing one's temper over a tree that wasn't even in season isn't the action of a perfectly wise and composed individual. If we saw such behavior today, we wouldn't call it divine, we'd call it irrational. There's also the issue of Jesus frequently threatening people with hell. A truly wise and peaceful figure wouldn't resort to fear-mongering as a way to enforce belief. The idea of eternal punishment for disbelief is a coercive and deeply authoritarian concept, not something we associate with wisdom or virtue. What Christians do when confronted? They deflect. They may say, Jesus did not invent hell, you are misinformed. They could face the music and argue as adults, but they deflect or leave the conversation. I see we have both different opinions. That is what really makes me frustrated about Christianity. First they accept to reason, when they fail, and fast they appeal to deinformation. The pattern is predictable. First they engage as if they are willing to have a rational discussion, but the moment they are cornered by logic and evidence, they either deflect, distort, or disengage entirely. Deflection. Instead of addressing the argument, they shift the conversation. If you point out that Jesus constantly threatens people with hell, they say, he didn't invent hell. As if that changes the fact that he used it as a tool of fear. Appeal to relativism. When they realize they can't defend their position logically, they retreat into, well, that's just your opinion and I have mine. This is intellectually dishonest because they started the discussion claiming their beliefs were based on truth, not opinion. Disengagement. If all else fails, they leave the conversation entirely or act as if the discussion was never serious to begin with. Let's agree to disagree. A way to avoid admitting defeat without having to change their views. Misinformation. If they don't outright quit the conversation, they start misrepresenting facts. You need to study theology. As if a deeper dive into dogma would somehow fix the contradictions. Or they claim that criticisms of Christianity are misinterpretations, while ignoring that Christians themselves can't agree on interpretations. For me, the most frustrated is when they accuse you of not being serious enough. I thought you were serious, and leave the conversation. That's one of the most dishonest and infuriating tactics. When they realize they can't refute your argument, they shift the blame onto you by questioning your seriousness or integrity. I thought you were serious. Translation: you made a point I can't refute, so instead of admitting it, I'll pretend you're the problem and walk away. This is classic gaslighting. It implies that you failed the discussion, not them, when in reality, they're the ones who refuse to engage honestly. They entered the conversation acting as if they were open to reasoning, but when reasoning doesn't go their way, they create an excuse to exit while saving face. It's especially ironic because Christians are the ones defending a belief system based on faith, not evidence, and they believe it is reason-based and evidence-based. They believe in talking snakes, virgin births, and resurrection, but when you present a logical critique, suddenly you're the one being not serious. This tactic is ultimately a defense mechanism. It allows them to walk away without confronting the discomfort of doubt. But from an intellectual standpoint, it's a total concession. They're essentially admitting, I have no response, so I'll pretend the conversation wasn't worth having. This pattern frustrates precisely because it exposes the bad faith in which many of these conversations take place. If they were genuinely open to reasoning, they would follow the argument wherever it leads, even if that meant questioning their beliefs. But Christianity, like all dogmatic systems, is built on not questioning. The moment the foundation is shaken, the believer's instinct is not to reevaluate, it's to retreat. 2. Christians misinterpret Jesus' message. When confronted with problematic passages in the Bible or questionable actions taken by Christians, a common defense is that these individuals simply misunderstood Jesus' teachings. This argument conveniently allows Christians to disassociate from any negative aspects of their religion while keeping the positive aspects intact. Here I like a point from Sam Harris. The Christians from the past knew well both the Old and New Testament. And they did what they did. What is frustrating is modern Christians believing they are better than the primitive Christians. There is nothing new in Christianity. How came they no more than the primitive Christians? The layers of complexity they added is called secularism. The only reason Christians today are moderate is because our society made them. Christianity has a pattern. They hold to their dogma until it is impossible to hold. It was like that with slavery, women's rights, and more. Modern Christians like to distance themselves from the atrocities of the past, slavery, witch hunts, religious wars, by claiming that those Christians misunderstood the Bible while they today understand it properly. But as Sam Harris pointed out, those past Christians knew their Bible very well. In fact, they were far more immersed in it than today's casual believers. This raises the question: how can modern Christians claim to know better than the early Christians who lived much closer to the time of Jesus? The uncomfortable truth is that what they call progress is not due to Christianity at all, but rather secular influence forcing Christianity to adapt. So when modern Christians act morally superior to their predecessors, they're not proving Christianity has evolved. They're proving that secularism forced Christianity to change, not the other way around. Christianity bends to society, not the reverse. If Christianity had intrinsic moral truth, it wouldn't have needed to be dragged kicking and screaming into every moral advancement. 3. They are not true Christians. This argument suggests that those who commit atrocities in the name of Christianity were never true Christians to begin with. However, the criteria for who qualifies as a true Christian are often unclear, and historical figures responsible for religious violence often justified their actions using the Bible. 4. Christianity is now peaceful. There has been amazingly little opposition to most of the encroachments of ecclesiastical interests. One reason for this seems to be the widespread belief that religion is nowadays mild and tolerant and that persecutions are a thing of the past. It is a dangerous illusion. While many religious leaders are undoubtedly genuine friends of freedom and toleration and are furthermore confirmed believers in the separation of church and state, there are unfortunately many others who would still persecute if they could and who do persecute when they can. Why I am not a Christian. Paul Edwards' preface. Christians often argue that the violent past of their religion is irrelevant because modern Christianity is now peaceful. While it is true that much of mainstream Christianity today is less violent than in the past, this does not erase centuries of harm or the ongoing issues tied to religious influence in politics and social issues. 5. Look at all the good Christians do. Many believers point to charitable deeds performed by Christians as evidence of their faith's validity, or that Christianity is a force for good, even thought it is clearly evil at least some of the time. However, good deeds are not exclusive to Christianity. People from all religious and non-religious backgrounds engage in acts of kindness. Morality is not inherently tied to religious belief. Also, you should do the math counting both good deed and bad deeds and make a net calculation, not a biased one. When you consider a medical treatment, you count both cure and side effects. 6. You have a strong feeling against Christianity. Some Christians dismiss criticism of their religion by claiming that the critic has personal biases or emotional reasons for opposing Christianity. This is often a way to deflect valid arguments without addressing them directly. At least for me, it is true that I get involved on topics that I have a strong feeling. For instance, I got involved with insulin studies based on a friend I had who had diabetes. Also, I got involved with science thinking about all the great discoveries done and that helped humankind. You cannot separate your emotions from the target. The only reason I am interested in Bolsonaro is not due to his good life, good deed. it is because all the harm he caused. The reason why I study Israel is not because I am Christian, it is because all the harm in name of God the people of God do. This is a lazy way for Christians to dismiss criticism without engaging with it. Instead of addressing your arguments, they try to pathologize your interest in the topic, as if caring about something means your arguments are invalid. But here's the reality. Strong feelings are often a sign that something matters. If someone spends time studying climate change, it's probably because they care about the environment. If someone researches dictatorships, it's likely because they are concerned about human rights. If someone critiques Christianity, it's usually because they recognize the harm it has caused and continues to cause. Dismissing critics by saying, "You just have a strong feeling against Christianity," is an attempt to shift the conversation away from facts and onto emotions. It implies that the critic is biased while the believer is neutral, when in reality Christians are the ones emotionally invested in defending their faith. This is the straw man fallacy. Also, even if someone were emotionally invested, that doesn't mean they are wrong. A scientist researching cancer may have lost a loved one to the disease, but that doesn't invalidate their research. In fact, it might make them even more dedicated to uncovering the truth. So when Christians use this argument, they aren't addressing the critique. They're just trying to discredit the critic. 7. You must read the entire Bible and study theology. Skeptics are frequently told that they cannot critique Christianity unless they have read the entire Bible and taken theology courses. However, this is an unrealistic standard. Many Christians themselves have not done this, and people critique ideas all the time without needing expert-level knowledge. 8. You hate God. A common but flawed argument is that atheists or critics of Christianity are simply rebelling against God because they hate Him. This argument assumes that the person secretly believes in God but chooses to reject Him, which is not the case for most non-believers. I love the one they say you want to sin. Sin is a Christian concept. It makes no sense to accuse an atheist of wanting to sin. It is a Christian-based belief. 9. I choose to believe. When backed into a logical corner, some Christians resort to saying that faith is simply a personal choice. While this is technically true, it does not validate the claims of Christianity. It just affirms that they are choosing to believe despite objections. 10. Those were Christians' actions, not Christianity. Whenever Christianity is criticized for historical atrocities, such as the Crusades or the Inquisition, believers often claim that these were the actions of individuals, not of Christianity itself. This argument ignores the fact that these actions were often justified using Christian doctrine. 11. Christianity improved women's rights, extra. This is a revisionist claim that ignores history. Christianity, like most patriarchal religions, has actively oppressed women for centuries. The Bible explicitly reinforces male dominance. Wives, submit yourselves unto your own husbands as unto the Lord. Ephesians 5 verse 22. Let your women keep silence in the churches, for it is not permitted unto them to speak. 1 Corinthians 14 verse 34. I do not permit a woman to teach or to have authority over a man. She must be silent. 1 Timothy 2 verse 12. For most of history, Christian societies denied women the right to vote, work, or own property. Women were seen as extensions of their husbands, and their primary purpose was childbirth. They even dared to discuss whether women have soul. What actually improved women's rights? The Enlightenment, which promoted individual rights and reason over religious doctrine. Feminist movements, which Christians often opposed, arguing that feminism was anti-family or against God's natural order. Today, many Christians try to reframe their religion as pro-women, but this is only because secularism forced change. It's not that Christianity changed society. It's that society changed Christianity. 12. Christianity improved slavery, extra. This is one of the most absurd claims. The Bible explicitly endorses slavery. Your male and female slaves are to come from the nations around you. From them you may buy slaves. Leviticus 25 verse 44. Slaves, obey your earthly masters with fear and trembling. Ephesians 6 verse 5. If a man beats his male or female slave with a rod and the slave does not die immediately, but recovers after a day or two, he is not to be punished. Exodus 21 verses 20 to 21. For centuries, Christians used the Bible to justify slavery. The idea of slavery comes from the Bible is curse of Ham. In the American South, pro-slavery preachers argued that slavery was God's will and that abolitionists were rebelling against divine order. The church only abandoned its defense of slavery when it became politically impossible to continue supporting it. What really ended slavery? Secular humanist movements, which rejected the idea of divine justification for oppression. The Age of Reason, which promoted universal human rights. Abolitionists who opposed Christianity's pro-slavery stance, many of whom were attacked by Christian institutions. The truth is, Christianity didn't abolish slavery. It held on to it as long as possible. When slavery finally ended, Christians rewrote history to pretend they were always on the right side. 13. Christianity caused no harm to anyone, extra. This claim is historically false and a blatant whitewashing of Christianity's legacy. The reality is that Christianity has been responsible for centuries of violence, oppression, and persecution. Here are just a few examples. 1. The Crusades, 1096 to 1271. Christian armies waged wars against Muslims, Jews, and even fellow Christians. Entire cities were slaughtered in the name of Christ. 2. The Inquisition, 12th to 19th century. The Catholic Church tortured and executed people for heresy, which could mean anything from practicing science to questioning doctrine. 3. Witch hunts, 15th to 18th century. Tens of thousands of, mostly, women were burned alive, drowned, or hanged because the church labeled them witches. 4. Forced conversions and colonization. Indigenous peoples in the Americas, Africa, and Asia were enslaved, massacred, and forcibly converted by Christian missionaries. Christian empires used religion to justify colonialism and cultural erasure. 5. The suppression of science. The Catholic Church imprisoned Galileo for supporting heliocentrism. Religious leaders opposed Darwin's theory of evolution and still fight against scientific progress today. 6. Christian support for slavery, racism, and segregation. Christian churches supported slavery for centuries. The Ku Klux Klan, KKK, is a Christian organization that used biblical justification for white supremacy. Apartheid in South Africa was defended by Christian theology. 7. LGBTQ+ oppression. Christian teachings fuel homophobia and transphobia worldwide. In many countries, Christian groups lobby to criminalize homosexuality and deny LGBTQ+ rights. 8. Religious wars and genocides. The 30 Years' War, 1618 to 1648, killed millions of people over Christian sectarian disputes. The Rwandan genocide, 1994, saw Christian clergy actively participate in massacres. 9. Modern-day Christian extremism. Anti-abortion terrorists murder doctors and bomb clinics. Christian nationalist movements undermine democracy and push theocratic rule. Christian leaders spread misinformation about contraception, HIV, AIDS, and vaccines. Christianity's harm is well documented. To say that Christianity caused no harm is historically ignorant. Christianity, like all major religions, has a bloody past and continues to cause harm today. The only reason Christianity is less violent now is because secularism forced it to evolve. 14. All religions caused, extra. This is an annoying argumentation. They try to make all religion equal. Funny fact, atheists also hold this bad argumentation, but for different reason. Christians want to defend Christianity, whereas atheists generally want to attack religion as all being equal. In both cases it is lazy talk. Final thoughts. These arguments tend to be surface level and often ignore deeper philosophical and historical discussions. While I always hope for a more thought-provoking conversation, I have noticed that many Christians rely on these same defenses. Perhaps this is due to a lack of critical examination of their own beliefs, or maybe it's simply a natural reaction to questioning something deeply ingrained. Either way, meaningful discussions about religion require more than just repeating familiar defenses. They require genuine engagement with history, philosophy, and evidence. I believe the true reason is that those argumentations were not created to make sense. They are defense mechanisms. The true goal is not a conversation, it is defending their faith. It would be easy to say, I have faith, that is all, but they try to use reason, even thought are historically horrible at reason. Christianity was born as an opposition to reason. Still, they cannot admit that their reasoning sucks. I have the feeling that old Christians would have no problems with sucking at reasoning. Just see how problematic is the Bible. It is not hard to find contradictions.
Hey there, you arrived to the end of this episode. You can always check out my YouTube channel and also keep watching because there are 7 episodes. So you just if you enjoyed this one, hopefully you are going to enjoy the next one. I always like to remember that you can support my work by buying my books. Even though I still don't have a book about religion, which is the main topic of the podcast, I do have a book about artificial intelligence, and also I have a blog called Scientists Free from Religion on Medium, and there are several blog posts there, and you can enjoy it, you can read it, and you can subscribe to my YouTube channel, you can share it with your friends. So hopefully I can hear from you and hope you had an amazing time. So hope to see you in the next episode.